You know the scene in courtroom dramas when it gets to the end and the attorney who you're rooting for pulls together the last few things and just absolutely drives home the final point. And then you look at the faces of the people in the jury and you're like, oh, I mean, I don't know how you can hear anything other than what that guy just said. I mean, he just nailed it, man. And you did so concisely, and I think we're finished here. I think you all know what you need to do. That's exactly how this part of Matthew chapter 23 that we're looking at right now reads to me. Jesus is in the home stretch of his complete and total statement of condemnation against the religious leaders, the Pharisees, the teachers of the law. And at the very end of our last conversation yesterday, I was acknowledging that Matthew chapter 23 is a bit weighty. It feels very confrontational, but when we understand that what is being held out here is not just some theological nitpicky differences, but what the text is saying is that the difference here is that Jesus is fully on board with the plan of God. He's here to execute the plan of God, and the redemption that God has been promising for so long is going to happen through Christ and through his obedience. That's the one side, and that the other side is the Pharisees who are resisting that plan and trying to screw it up at every single turn. The charge is that Jesus is the Son of God and that the Pharisees are the son of the evil one. So, yeah, there's going to be some tension here. And I think we've dived pretty deeply into it, but we're not quite done. So the last pivot that we saw was Jesus bringing up a reference to John the Baptist. Maybe the words that John the Baptist threw out in Matthew chapter 3 just stung enough that the Pharisees would go around repeating it, kind of like you do when you're recounting a hurtful fight that has happened and somebody said some really mean thing that super got through the armor and was probably actually sort of completely true, but you don't want it to be true. And so then when our feelings are hurt like that, we go around to people who we trust, who usually prop us back up. And we're like, can you believe they said that? They said that. And then we almost turned it into like a little joke. Oh, yeah, the brood of vipers, right? It's just so ridiculous and out there. But usually, come on, we only do that when it really got through the armor because it smacks of truth. So I wonder if these guys had repeated that phrase again and again and again, and then Jesus flips it back around on them, reclaiming it from them, reminding them of how they were adversarial toward John the Baptist, rejecting his work as a prophet. And then it picks up right here in verse 34 with Jesus going on. Therefore, I'm sending you prophets and wise men and teachers. Some of them you'll kill and crucify, others you'll flog in your synagogues and pursue from town to town. Now, what we're starting to see shape up here with that veiled reference to John the Baptist, and now this veiled reference to, I think, obviously the disciples, these prophets and wise men and teachers he's alluding to are going to be sent. I think what we're starting to see develop here in the home stretch of Matthew 23 is this idea of continuity, that God sent prophets. Those prophets prophesied the arrival of other prophets, including a great prophet who would point to the Messiah who was to come. And then that Messiah is commissioning people. He started in Matthew chapter 10 with the second of the 5 big discourses around which the book of Matthew is structured. He started by sending them out. And so what we're getting then is these people sent these people, and your forefathers mistreated this line of prophets at every single turn. These people said these other prophets are going to come and be mistreated. John the Baptist showed up pointing to Jesus, and you mistreated John the Baptist. Now Jesus shows up pointing toward the age of the church, pointing toward how his witnesses are going to go to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth, according to Acts 1:8. And in the same way you mistreated Jesus, so you're going to mistreat those disciples. Again, something they were fully made aware of on the front end when they signed up and are sent out on their first open world quest in Matthew chapter 10. And Jesus very specifically says, some of them, those who are to come, who he's talking about, you will kill and crucify. Others you will flog in your synagogues and pursue from town to town. That echoes, once again, the language of Matthew chapter 10, the missional discourse, where we get the right now on this immediate trip description that Jesus gives his disciples about what it's going to be like. Then we get the medium-term description. Here's what it's going to look like in the reasonable future and some things you're going to encounter. And then in the long-term perspective, here's what this resistance is going to look like to you and your spiritual, intellectual descendants over the decades and even the centuries. So if we connect this with the missional discourse of Matthew chapter 10, it's all the more evident that the people who are going to pose the problem to you are going to be people of the same intellectual, religious ilk as these Pharisees and Sadducees. And make no mistake about it, it's not just going to be mean tweets and disagreement. It's going to be violence. Anytime this crowd can get their fingers wrapped around the sword of power, they will swing it wildly, violently, and in your direction until they get what they want. How do we know? Because that's what they've always done. So Jesus is making it clear it doesn't even end with the crucifixion you guys are about to inflict on me. You're going to continue to do this, pursuing it from town to town. People who believe things that are true and want to be a part of the redemptive plan of God, they won't even be able to escape you. What he's painting a picture of is an enemy who will never relent, an enemy who is in dire need of judgment for the good of the redemptive plan of the whole thing. And so upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. We got to talk about that Zechariah, son of Berechiah thing a little bit later on. What? Locked in where? Crap, I'm coming.
5 minutes later.
Okay, I'm back, and I brought my daughter. I thought that I was hearing a little bit of noise while I was recording very, very important Bible things. Can you explain what that noise was?
So I was here to get boxes because we're going on a trip, and they're out under the porch in this little enclosed area. And the door, I thought it had a string on the inside so you can reopen it. And it swung closed while I was in there, and there was no string, so I was stuck in there.
So you were slamming boxes around to get my attention.
Yep.
And I'm down here like, I'm getting a little bit of noise. I'm trying to record very, very important Bible things right now. Could you please leave me alone? I just heard the noise and was like, man, I thought I told them I was going to record stuff. They're being super loud. But you were trapped in freezing cold conditions outside, locked under a porch.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Okay, I'm sorry. I love you so much. I'm sorry,
Oh,
kid.
you do.
All right, get going. Oh, my goodness. She looks so sad. She's all hunched over because it's a short porch, too, so it wasn't even like she could stand straight up. Dad. Oh, golly, I'm so sorry, kiddo. So, anyways, what were we talking about? Oh, yeah, I remember. It was all of the stuff about the long line of prophets that the Pharisees and their ilk, their predecessors, had rained violent death upon, and now Jesus is saying, look, I'm calling this what it is. You guys got to own that, because that's your legacy, that's your thing, and you're doing exactly what you always do right now. And before you do it to me, I'm going to state loud and clear to everyone that that is the case, and that what you represent is the opposite of the redemptive plan. I can't remember if I mentioned this a minute ago or not, but the whole Zechariah and Abel thing, that needs a little bit of attention, because it's probably one of the most difficult to make sense of passages in all of Matthew. So we're going to do a little aside next time around to work that thing through. Well, this went in some goofy directions, didn't it? But rest assured, my daughter is apparently fine, because she's not trapped in the freezing cold anymore, and I just get to feel a little bit like a schmuck. And you're probably going to have a whole lot of fun scrubbing back through this episode and trying to listen to wherever the first banging noises started to happen, so that you can do the mental math on how long exactly she was out there freezing while you and I just sat here and did this. Like the way I just roped you into my guilt. I thought it was fun. I suppose I could just edit all of that out, but this way you get a far more honest look at the chaos of my life and the fortitude and courage and level-headedness of my daughter, who's a rock star. All right, that's good for now. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.